They say that once upon a time, in these parts, under a cherry tree, the Mother of God appeared before people, and since then this settlement began to be called Višnieva, Cherry Tree's Place. In 1424, the Grand Lithuanian nobleman and diplomat Piotr Sienka Hidiholdovich built a wooden Catholic church in Višnieva on the banks of the river Holshanka. Unfortunately, we have not found the portrait of Piotr Sienka Hidiholdovich and the image of the church that he built, but here is a drawing by the artist Cesare Vecellio depicting a Grand Lithuanian nobleman in a costume typical of those times. The late 14th, early 15th centuries was a stormy and turbulent time, like all other times though. At that time, in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, two cousins fought for power, Jahaïḻa and Vitaŭt. In 1386, Jahaïḻa married Polish Queen Jadwiga and became King of Poland, but continued to lay claim to the Grand Lithuanian throne. Only in 1392 did the cousins agree on the division of power, and in 1410 they united their armies and won a crushing victory over the Knights of the Teutonic Order. In 1430, Piotr Sienka Hidiholdovich was an envoy to Pope Martin V in Rome. This mission had to do with attempts to crown Grand Duke Vitaŭt as King of Lithuania. However, Vitaŭt did not live to see the coronation, and the Grand Duchy never became a kingdom. At that time, in Czechia, the struggle for the reformation of the Catholic Church began. In particular, for conducting church services in the Czech language. The struggle soon turned into a long, bloody war that significantly destroyed the country's economy and the lives of its inhabitants. The symbol of the reform movement was the chalice. Its supporters, Hussites, demanded that the laity should be allowed to housel with a cup of wine after communion. Wine was considered a symbol of Christ's blood. According to the then customs of the Catholic Church, only priests were allowed to take a sip of wine from the chalice. One of the Hussite military leaders was Jan Žižka, who fought in 1410, along with Jahaïḻa and Vitaŭt, in the Battle of Grunwald. Jan Žižka was the first in history to use mobile artillery. The Hussites mounted cannons on wagons that moved in a column and fired at enemy troops. And at a halt, the wagons were placed in a circle, and thus a fortified shelter was formed for the fighters. At the same time, the 100 Years' War was going on in France, in which the English kings tried to seize power in the Kingdom of France. In the early 15th century, the luck in this war turned in favor of the British. After the victory at Agincourt, English King Henry V was declared heir to the French throne. By 1429, the British captured northeastern France and its capital, Paris. France was saved by a simple peasant girl, Joan of Arc. She, still very young, heard the voices of St. Michael the Archangel and Saints Catherine of Alexandria and Margaret of Antioch. The voices ordered the army to go to Orleans, besieged by the British, to liberate the city, to raise the Dauphin Charles to the French throne, and to expel the invaders from the kingdom. And what do you think? She did it. The end of this story was deplorable. Joan of Arc was captured and burnt to death, but the French won this long war. Joan of Arc became a national symbol of France. The church recognized her as a saint, and her image is being used widely. It is time to return to Višnieva. By the way, it is over 5,400 miles to Florida. In 1600, the town and its surroundings were bought by Adam Kraptovich. His son, Voivode Governor of Novograd, Yuri Kraptovich, built a stone Catholic church in Višnieva. The Catholic Church of the Visitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary is a single-nave church with a semicircular apse and low side sacristies. To the east of the temple, there is a gate, bell tower, built in the late 19th century. In 1906, the facade of the church was rebuilt. It was decorated with two three-tiered square towers. The wooden altar, sculptures, and stucco decorations were created in the 18th century. Višnieva is located on the edge of a huge forest called the Nalibatskaya Pushcha, Nalibaki Old-Growth Forest. At that time, burning wood was the main source of energy used in various industrial furnaces. Therefore, it was profitable to locate here power-consuming enterprises, glass, pottery, and metallurgical manufactories. Ore was mixed with wood charcoal and placed in the furnace. At the high temperature created by burning coal and the supply of preheated air, all the iron from the ore was converted into molten cast iron, which was periodically released outside. Production was continuous. The furnace worked around the clock and did not cool down. The raw material was the bog iron ore, naturally deposited on the rhizomes of oleaginous plants. One of the owners of Višnieva was Joachim Ignat Litvor Kraptovich, a state, economic, scientific, and cultural figure of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. In 1778, Joachim Kraptovich built a big metallurgical manufactory in Višnieva. In 1790, a blast furnace was built there, the first one on Belarusian lands. Some of the buildings of this metallurgical manufactory have survived to this day. At the ancient cemetery in Višnieva, it is possible to find monuments made of the metal produced at the Kraptovich plant. During the uprising, led by Thaddeus Kosciuszko against the Russian occupation, 1794, weapons for the rebels were made at the metallurgical plant in Višnieva. Back in the mid-18th century, Joachim Kraptovich allowed Jews to buy land in Višnieva for building houses. It was a common thing in those days. Local landlords encouraged Jews to move to some settlement to boost trade and crafts. In 1795, after the third partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Višnieva became part of Russia. The Jews of Višnieva were classified as burghers, a class that included city residents, small traders, and artisans. Gradually, Višnieva turned into a typical Shtetl, a small semi-urban settlement with predominantly Jewish population. The Jews of Višnieva lived in accordance with their traditions. They made a living by trade and crafts. Children went to Keter, Jewish national religious school. Adults went to synagogue. On the Sabbath, candles were lit in all houses. Every week, on Vilenskaya Street, near the Catholic Church, public sales took place. And twice a year there were big fairs. In 1863 to 1864, the townsfolk of Višnieva supported Kastuś Kalinoўski's insurgents against the Russian authorities. Weapons were made for them at the metallurgical plant. On the photo taken by Giuseppe Achille Bonoldi, there is Kastuś Kalinoўski, considered a national hero of present-day Belarus, Poland, and Lithuania. The insurrection was crushed by the Tsarist authorities. Mikhail Muravyov, the Governor-General of the Northwestern Krai, headed the suppression of the revolt. Many of the residents of Višnieva were exiled to hard labor in Siberia. In 1865, a Russian Orthodox church was built in Višnieva. The Church of Saints Cosmas and Damian is a typical Muravyovka that consists of a bell tower, an antechamber, a prayer hall, and an apse. Muravyov was one of the initiators of the harsh Russification policy on the territory of the former Grand Duchy of Lithuania. He was reported as saying that what Russian rifle did not succeed in doing will be finished off by the Russian school and the Russian Church. Therefore, at that time, hundreds of such churches, called Muravyovka, were built throughout Belarus. By the end of the 19th century, in Višnieva, there worked a brick and pottery factory, a cloth factory, a distillery, a leather factory of Kaplan, a match factory, a watermill, while the metallurgical plant was closed in 1868. During World War I, Višnieva found itself on the line of German military fortifications. Its residents became refugees. Upon their return, they found a dilapidated place. As a result of the Peace of Riga, 1921, Višnieva was given to Poland. In the early 1930s, the Miastečkas, market town, began to grow. There were about 50 various stores and retail outlets, artisan workshops. In addition, there were larger enterprises, Rudzyński's mill, 2 hotels, Podbiereski's and Levine's, 2 restaurants, Tviartniski's and Rabinovich's, Yakubienia's store, 3 pubs, 3 bakeries, Pobel's pharmacy, a first aid post of Dr. Padzielvier, and 2 paramedics, Piskin and Shmulevich, a veterinary hospital, and a postal telegraph office. In 1939, Višnieva was the center of a municipality. There were 3 religious institutions, a Roman Catholic church, a Russian Orthodox church, and a Jewish synagogue, and there were 2 schools, a Polish 7-year school and a Jewish one. In the years between the 2 world wars, many Jews from Višnieva emigrated to Palestine, Eretz Yisrael. Thanks to them and their descendants, this Miastečkas is well remembered in the modern world. In 1932, Yitzhak Persky left Višnieva for Eretz Yisrael. 2 years later, his wife Sarah and sons Shimon and Gershon came to him. Shimon Persky is now known throughout the world as Shimon Peres, Nobel Prize winner, twice Prime Minister, and President of Israel. Yehoshua Rabinovitz is another famous Israeli politician born and raised in Višnieva. In 1969 to 1974, he was mayor of Tel Aviv. Yehoshua Rabinovitz, after studying in Vilna, now Vilnius, returned to Višnieva and taught at the local Jewish school until his departure to Eretz Yisrael in 1934. World War II was a disaster for Višnieva. First, the Soviet government destroyed the local businesses, and then the Nazis destroyed the vast majority of the Jewish population. After this war, the Shtetl ceased to exist, having only remained as a symbol of the lost world of Eastern European Jewry. Well, we shall begin the last part of our story from afar, mentally transporting ourselves from Višnieva to the city of Jezqazğan in Kazakhstan. In the 1950s, Gulag prisoners worked at the Jezqazğan copper mine, among whom there was Piotr Betel, a teacher of the German language from Višnieva. There, at the Gulag camp, a prisoner received a parcel, at the very bottom of which there was a book of poetry by Adam Mickiewicz. Knowing the Polish language well, Piotr Betel decided to translate the epic poem Pan Tadeusz into the Belarus Sun language. In the evenings and nights, he wrote down his translation on sheets, cut out from 3-layer paper bags with cement. And instead of ink, he used zelyanka, brilliant green, which was taken secretly from a medical sanitary station by a medic. The poem starts with the famous declaration of love. Lithuania, my country, thou art like health. How much thou shouldst be prized, only he can learn, who has lost thee. Today, thy beauty in all its splendor I see and describe, for I yearn for thee. One of the main plot lines of Pan Tadeusz is the struggle for the independence of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Representatives of 2 warring noble families make peace and join Napoleon's army to fight against Russian troops. Alas, Napoleon was defeated. The warriors, who joined his troops under their national symbols, return home, vanquished. But the desire for freedom and independence remains in their souls and is inherited by their descendants. In the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, between large cities, there were Miastečkas, small towns, which could be reached from any village by cart or horseback in about an hour. Such market towns played an important role in the development of the country's economy and culture. They were administrative, religious, cultural, industrial, and commercial centers. On the map of 1603, Magni Ducatus Lithuaniae, or simply the Radziwiłł map, one can count over 1,000 such towns, with a population of over 300 people. The cataclysms of the last 2 centuries turned most of Miastečkas into villages, some of which miraculously preserved their old Catholic and Orthodox churches, too large for the few local residents. However, it is worth learning more about them in order to understand that these small places and their history should be cherished and remembered.